ADHD Rewired, episode 438. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is David DeWitt. David is a registered investment advisor and podcaster who helps adults with ADHD take back control of their money. He's been a registered investment advisor for 6 years, but it wasn't until his ADHD awakening early in 2021 that he realized he wanted to work with other people with ADHD. David knows from experience that effective personal finance when you have ADHD is hard, even when you are a trained professional. After his ADHD awakening, he set out to build a financial planning model that works for ADHD brains, first testing it on himself, and now he is on a mission to help as many ADHDers as he can. David, welcome to ADHD Rewired.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So let's get into this. So there is so much shame and overwhelm and sort of burying our head in the sand that is so commonly experienced when we're dealing with money when we have ADHD. How do you view financial planning in a way that is ADHD friendly?
Sure. So one of the very first things to do is to try and get past the initial sort of clutter that's in a lot of people with ADHD's brains when it comes to talking about money. There is the clutter, the overwhelm, the shame, and the guilt. And then once you get past that clutter, you're able to sort of ask questions and actually figure out what are the deep values about why money is important to you. A lot of times when, that question gets asked, the answer ends up being something like freedom, stability, the ability to be present with the ones I love. And sometimes it takes a few, layers like peeling an onion to get down to that deep level. But when you help someone with ADHD or anyone really frame money in terms of that's the importance is less about having a lot of money for things and more to help me live a more fulfilling life and fulfill my purpose, so to speak, in some cases. That is one of the ways that helps at least people get grounded to start moving in the right direction.
So what does money mean for you then?
For me, money is important to me because it provides me freedom. And, that is basically what I've come to realize is, if you're in debt, you have less freedom. You are sort of enslaved to the creditor. You have to pay money. But if you have lots of savings, for instance, you have freedom. If you hate your job, you can quit. You can find something else. You can do what you want. You have freedom. So for me, it's the freedom to be able to make my own choices, to be there for my family, and really to just be able to create a life that I'm proud of.
So when you're working with folks with ADHD, what do you find to be like the trigger for what it is that they come to you to see? Is it like when they're already when they're kind of in a good place and they're like, all right, like I want to really maximize kind of how my money's working for me? Or is it help? I know I'm supposed to be doing these things and I don't know the first thing about it.
Yeah. So far in my practice, there's been two main types. There's one type where somebody has been recently diagnosed. They've gone through maybe some therapy. Maybe they're really starting to put the pieces of their life together. And they're on this sort of journey of like, I'm going to better myself. And so I find they're kind of like recruiting the different sort of things in their life that can help them put it together. And a lot of times they're in a decent place and they're just really looking to just like optimize their life. And they feel kind of liberated in a sense. And they're just usually very thankful that I exist. So I'm not saying that in a way to say like anything like salesy. Obviously, I'm saying because there is that guilt and shame. And so the guard is lowered quickly because the idea of going to some financial advisor is sort of intimidating. And then the other side of the coin is people that really kind of are in a place where they're looking for help and they don't know where to turn. They may have some debt. They may have tried so hard to curb their impulsive spending, but they're just not really quite, making progress, and they're looking for someone to help hold them accountable.
So there's a couple areas that I would like to explore with you. One is debt, the other is spending, and then is also investing. So let's talk about debt. How do you approach helping people get out of debt?
Yeah, sure. So one of the very first things that we'll do is we'll kind of explore why the debt exists. I want to sort of have someone trace their history. Like, why does the credit card have that balance? What were the purchases you made? How are you feeling when you made those purchases? And really kind of get them to understand, sort of really face up to the situation so that they can overcome it. So you can sort of, it's almost like when you sort of admit that, there is an issue and we need to do something about it. So that's usually the first step. And then from there, it's empowering them to do it themselves, but I'll help them structure the plan. The plan, will usually use the snowball method of debt repayment, because the snowball method of debt repayment is all about getting quick wins and quick satisfying wins. So that's when you start with the lowest balance debt you have. Doesn't matter the interest rate, the lowest balance. So if you have 5 credit cards and one has only a $300 balance, that's the first one that we'll tackle. So you can say, I paid off one credit card, let's move on to the next one. And that's really the approach.
Okay. I found with a lot of sort of financial management, it requires management, like regular checking in with stuff, regular actions taken on a regular basis, because this tends to be a domain that for a lot of people just is not interesting. And, at best, at worst, is just overwhelming. So how do you help people engage in those sort of regular activities of the financial management, specifically first when you're dealing with paying down debt?
Yeah. So basically, we said I help create the plan for them. And then essentially, I'll be checking in with a client who's paying down debt, once a month, really, to see how they're doing. Because a lot of the time paying down debt, it requires not just having the plan, but then it's all about how are you going to modify your behavior? Like, what are you doing this month that's going to help support that ability? Because at the end of the day, the reason why you're in debt is because you're overspending. So how are we going to start spending more on things that are actually important to us, and pausing and putting the card back in our pocket when we're driving past McDonald's or whatever? Or it's really about putting your money where your values are and sticking to a budget. And a budget's a dirty word, but we can get into that later.
Okay, so putting your money where your values are.
Yes.
Speak more to that.
Yes. So part of the process of planning is, like we talked about in the beginning, is uncovering your values and what's actually important to you and how money can help construct a life where you're able to empower your values. Maybe your value is giving back to the community. Well, if you're constantly spending all of your excess money on things that Amazon, you see something on Amazon, you just want to buy it, you have to buy it. So you buy it, there's no barrier to not buying Amazon because it's free shipping, whatever Prime. So if you spend $300 a month on Amazon, well, if you added up $300 over 5 years per month, then you could actually, and you really care about giving back, that's what you want to do, then you're able to do that just by limiting how much you're buying of things, that the slippers you don't need, or the new, phone case, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying?
So part of it is helping people understand the difference between things they want and things they need.
Yeah, well, yes, for sure. That's definitely part of it. It's a huge part of it. And, I find from my own personal experience, I've slipped into a spending binge that could last 6 months. And when I'm doing that, I did that on golf, was my big issue. At that point in my life, I hadn't framed what I was really wanting in my future. I didn't need all of the golf stuff. What I needed was to make sure I was on track to be able to support my kid when I have kids, to be able to give them security, give them maybe plan for their education and all these other things. But 6 months of just relentless golf spending kind of blew that up. So if I had at least at first, the beginning of that process, understood sort of what is the end game to life, how is money going to support a very deep and important end game? And I guess that's a long way of saying that by pausing before you buy something and thinking, does this line up with the values that I know I have because I've done the work to discover them? Then you can actually maybe say no.
It sounds like something very similar to something that I teach in my coaching groups and with my alumni. And the idea is, so when we do our yearly planning, is to identify a word or a theme for the year, but then keep that word or theme like at the place where you're doing your actual weekly planning. So that bigger vision for the year is connected to the things you're actually planning on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So it sounds like what you're saying is get really clear on what you value and then put that sort of cue for yourself of what you value sort of in the space that's going to help you make better financial decisions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what I usually recommend is people create their own one-page financial plan. And it's super, super basic. And the one-page financial plan is at the top of it, you have your statement of financial purpose, which is what you come up with after you've done some exercises with yourself or with a partner. You can say, have someone ask you, why is money important to you? And, I think I read about this. It's a classic financial planning tactic, but I also did read about it in Russell Barkley's book, The Three Whys. So you just ask, why is money important to you? You might say, because it helps me have less anxiety and, I'm able to buy the things I want, blah, blah, blah. So why is having less anxiety and buying the things you want important to you? And then it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's one way you can find your statement of financial purpose. So you write that on the top of the paper. And it's nice to use a nice piece of paper, a Sharpie, make it look nice. And then you just think about...
That means that you have to go out on Amazon right now and buy some nice stationery and pens. Is that what you're saying?
For this exercise, I probably am okay with that if you're going to do it. I really am. Because this could make the difference.
Okay. So you have your whys, your purpose and your whys. Okay.
And then what I like to do is, and you can either do this in one of two ways, but I really like the timeline way. So you draw a timeline from left to right and you draw yourself a stick figure on top of it and on the left side, and you say, this is me today. And you just think about what are some key milestones that you'd like to hit over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Maybe you can put retirement at age 65, but for people with ADHD that I've talked to, a lot of them say, I'm never retiring, I'm never going to. So I prefer to say, okay, you're not retiring, but you're going to be financially independent. Let's just call it that. You're going to be able to retire if you want to.
I need like a new word because the idea of like, when I think of retirement, I think of like, sitting by a pool or a beach forever. Like that just terrifies me. I'm like, all right, I can do that for a week. I'll be great. But then I'm like, I'll be bored.
And that's what I hear all the time. And so I say, well, would you like to be able to retire if you had to? If you couldn't work, would you like to know you're okay? Or would you like to have the flexibility to do whatever you want to do? If it's a side gig, maybe you want to invest money into a new business, like some hobby you've been sleeping on for 30 years and you want to finally do it. You can save for something that you'll want to do when you're at quote unquote retirement age. There's something that you're going to want to do that having more money than you have now will help you do. So let's figure what that thing is and help you save for it.
All right. So what else goes on this one page?
So that's basically it. So you have your few goals at the bottom of the timeline. So maybe it's 5 years out, you're buying your house. Maybe it's 15 years out, you're, sending your kids to school. A lot of times what happens is when you visualize it like this, you're putting the time that you're retiring or whatever you're doing and your kids going to school and you're like, oh, wow, they're happening very close together. That's going to be a lot of money at one time, stopping income and kids going to school. So then you're seeing like, oh, wow, so I need to plan a little bit for that ahead of time. So at least gets the thought into your head so that it's not a total surprise down the road.
So what I want to do is take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about why budget is a dirty word.
So yeah.
We will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our coaching community. We've had over 900 adults with ADHD go through our 10-week coaching program. At 4 seasons per year with multiple groups per season, one thing is for certain. With the right tools and the right support, we can do hard things. And we don't have to do them in the hardest way possible.
Before this group, I thought I had to do this alone or with the support of other neurotypical people around me.
I joined this group because I was exhausted trying to do everything myself.
Before this group, I was busy but not efficient.
I joined the group for all the tricks of how to plan, and they work.
Increasing my time awareness without being stressed is such a big win for me.
What I learned in the course of this group is that change comes much more fluidly with less resistance and more acceptance of self.
Yeah, like learning to plan, daily planning and thinking that through, whether it's the night before, the day or the morning of, and then also yearly planning and how much that's going to affect me in the future.
Things that I've learned is scheduling, not over scheduling, time management, and how to plan for the future.
I think that I've made strides that would have taken me 10 years, if not more, if I weren't in this group.
I discovered hope and the possibility of change around things that I was convinced were immovable.
They just taught me to be compassionate with myself and to say, hey, this is a process.
So many times in my life, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. Only this time I'm grateful.
This is the place that you have ADHD to be.
And I just want to thank everybody for being here because it's so powerful to just listen and be with everybody else.
Get registered for our upcoming fall registration kickoff event this Friday, July 22nd, by going to coachingrewired.com and clicking on the yellow button at the top of the page. You won't want to miss out because the earlier you register, the more you can save. Join us this Friday and save up to $500. Join July 28th and save $400. August 4th, $300. August 11th, $200. August 18th, $100. And on or after August 25th, it'll be full price. So don't wait. Mark your calendars and go to coachingrewired.com to see the details and, most importantly, to get on our fall interest list. Here at ADHD Rewired, we believe in growth through community. And what sets us apart is being able to grow alongside others who can show us compassion and truly understand the difficulties we face. We know there is no one-size-fits-all approach to managing ADHD, which is why we encourage members to experiment with all of the different tools, strategies, tips, and tricks that we share, because there is value in hearing different perspectives and different ideas, all from different ADHD brains. Life with ADHD can be hard, but with ADHD Rewired's coaching and accountability groups and our alumni membership community that is available for our alumni to get ongoing support, we can learn to do the hard things, and we'll learn that we don't have to do them in the hardest way possible. So if you want to grow and take your ADHD management to the next level, then go to coachingrewired.com and click on the yellow button at the top of the page to get your name added to our fall interest list. And join us for our fall registration kickoff event, July 22nd at coachingrewired.com. Pre-registration submissions are due at 11:59 p.m. Central on the day before our registration event. Learn more and get invited by adding your name to our fall interest list at coachingrewired.com. Take advantage of the early registration discounts. Join us for ARC 30. ARC is ADHD Rewired Coaching. That's coachingrewired.com. If you like ADHD Rewired and want to stay up to date with our show notes and weekly episodes, then don't forget to subscribe to ADHD Rewired by going to adhdrewired.com/podcast or by hitting the subscribe or follow button in your favorite podcast player. And if you love the show, don't forget to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any podcast player that allows reviews. It really does help and it makes a huge difference. While you're there, check out all of our other shows we have here on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network by going to adhdrewired.com/podcast network. We have ADHD Essentials with Brenda Mahan, Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb, and ADHD Diversified with MJ Siemens. Did you know that you can join me, our podcast host, and ADHD Rewired coaches every second Tuesday of the month for a monthly live Q&A? If you missed last week's live Q&A, I can't wait for you to hear it next month because it was a really good one. Go to adhdrewired.com/events to register for our monthly live Q&As so you can join us on Zoom and ask your ADHD-related questions. Get more from ADHD Rewired at adhdrewired.com. That's adhdrewired.com. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being a part of this community. All right, we are back with David DeWitt. David, budget is a dirty word. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Blake, what do you think when you think of budgeting?
What do I think when I think of budgeting? I think of
like you have to go on a budget. What are you thinking? How are you feeling?
Let's start there. I definitely have that sort of angsty feeling in my gut. I immediately think back to when I was first going through my divorce and having to starting to like track and monitor all my expenses kind of for the first time. And I hated every second of it. So when I think of budget, I think of having to frequently staying on top of the management of details.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, that sounds stressful, overwhelming, and something they don't feel like starting to do.
Mm-hmm.
It also can feel very depriving. Like you're depriving, you're going to have to sacrifice things, give up things you like to do. You're not going to be able to go have your morning coffee. So I just think the word budget is not a great way of putting it. So I'm stealing this from Christine Lucan, who's a financial coach that I've had on my podcast. She calls it a prosperity plan. So when you think of prosperity plan, you think of, okay, if I do this plan, I'm going to go into the world of prosperity. So at the very beginning, you're at least framing it better. And what a budget really is just reallocating your money, like we talked about earlier, to the things that are actually important to you. You say, I have this amount of money to spend this month. Let me look at my spending over the past 3 months and let's see where I spent money that just did not add value to my life whatsoever, or maybe it even detracted from my life because it was like fast food or something. And it's just something I shouldn't be doing anyways. Oh, wow. I spent, $500 on fast food over the past 3 months. Okay. Let's just cut that out and allocate that towards something that's maybe a little bit more important, like a down payment towards my home. So let's take that fast food money and move it to a separate savings account that's for a down payment for a home in 5 years. So that is sort of moving you towards a goal that's going to help you achieve prosperity, so to speak, or at least help you start to create the life that right now might feel very hard, out of reach. But if you just have a plan and make small steps to it, then it can happen. And so a budget is really helping you move in the right direction, not take away.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes hard when we're having discussions about sort of financial planning to not recognize that there's absolutely a bit of privilege sort of in even in this conversation, right? Because I know of a lot of people who would say that like they're not spending recklessly, they're trying to save, but they have $200,000 of debt, a lot of it being from school, So how do you help someone like that try to get out of the rut and actually start saving?
Yeah, I totally appreciate what you're saying about there is some privilege, because if you're making a lot of money, then you obviously it's easier. It's just easier. There's no way around it. If you're making less money and you're grinding really hard, you have a lot of debt, then it is harder. I mean, there's just there's no shortcuts to any of this, but it really requires a very deep level of commitment and belief, and sort of changing your mindset that you are like worthy of, accumulating wealth, of accumulating savings, and of paying down your debt, and of getting out of maybe the sort of chokehold you've been in. And maybe it's even been generational, where your family's just not been great with money for generations. Part of the work is also helping them realize that you can change the script with some very, very deliberate actions and starting to save and paying off the debt. But yes, I mean, at the end of the day, one of the very best ways to help yourself accelerate your path is to find ways to make more money too. You can either save more, make more money, or some combination of the two. So helping someone find a creative outlet, maybe they can try freelancing, maybe even stuff like that can help people sort of unlock some more opportunities.
So I think one of the things that I found that I have experienced over time with working with financial professionals is this sort of feeling like I don't even know what to be asking, and I know all the words that you just said were English, but I didn't understand a single word you just said. Like, it's so I've had that experience so many times with different financial professionals.
Yeah.
So for someone who's maybe has been thinking for a while, or maybe they've had it on their list of things to do, it's like, start figuring out retirement, and it's as far as they've gotten, and that item's been on their list for years. How do you start?
So you're asking how do you start if you're waking up for the first time and you're thinking, I'm going to address my money situation starting today. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a very good question. It's a very good question, because it's very hard to know what to do if you don't have some level of education, right? So, and that's criminally undertaught in this country and probably everywhere else. Personal finance, where we learn how to do algebra and stuff, but like, why not just also have a class about like how to balance a checkbook? Well, we don't even do that anymore, but how about just how to budget? Like, why not do that? Like, it seems so obvious, but
yes.
But I would say like to listen to some podcasts or read a book. I find, once I read something or I get somehow triggered into a feeling of like I'm going to start like getting into something, it can kind of snowball into sort of like I'm going to get into it and I'm going to maybe even really like maybe hyper like focus on it for a little bit. That can be a good way to start it, but that's tough because like when you have ADHD, it's like you think of retirement, you think of money, and it's like all these things come over. It's like this big nebulous future thing, like this big confusing thing. So it's hard, but there is like an order of operations you can apply to it. So like if you have credit card debt, that's one of the first things you're going to want to do. But one of the very first things you do is build up a very base level of savings, like maybe $1,000, because that's like the buffer between catastrophe and being able to manage some little things that come your way. So that's one of the first things to do. And once you do that, then it's tackling the debt. Once you tackle the debt, it's all about, okay, let's see what I can get from my work 401k. Maybe I get a match. I get free money. Okay, let's do that. Once you get your match, then you can move on and say, okay, let's build up my emergency fund more. So there is like an order of operations you can apply to at least give a framework for someone to start. But how would someone know what that order of operations is? Just waking up one day and saying, I'm going to tackle it, will require some education, right? So I think that's very important.
One of the things that I have said to different financial professionals when working with them, because it's just a domain that I get overwhelmed by. I will say, I need things to be explained like Sesame Street simple, right? Like, how would you explain what you're telling me right now to a 4-year-old to make it make sense?
Yeah.
And I think because I had fired my previous accountant because I would talk, first of all, I don't know how common this is in the financial professional space. Like, is it common to be charged by the minute?
It's not, well, for consultation by the minute, I mean, by the hour, you mean like, yeah, by the hour, it can be. It can be by the hour.
Because knowing that I was getting like, if I called them and I was on the clock, I'm like, don't ask me how I'm doing. Like, you're charging me for that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's not as common in financial planning, but in accounting, it can be. Obviously, like lawyers and stuff is totally like that. Like, you can't even talk to them at all. Usually with financial planning, it's usually, always like you need to have, $500,000, to invest with me. And then I'm going to charge you a 1% of that. And so that excludes a large part of the population from being able to have a financial planner. So the whole financial planning and advice industry it is kind of a privileged thing to be able to afford for a lot of times. And that's something that I've really, when I looked across the landscape of, trying to help people with ADHD, there's a lot of high earners that spend it all away. Right. So, it's how can I help as many people as I can? So I've tried to be accommodating.
When we're thinking about sort of creating our financial future, I remember when I was a kid, my dad was in financial planning, and I remember he had this, I think the word is amortization charts. That showed a compound interest and age. And I was always like very fascinated by this idea of, put in this X amount of money when you're young. And just like the longer time you have, like, it just exponentially grows so much that, they always say it's like the best time to invest is like last year or last decade. It's like the best time to plant a tree was yesterday.
Yeah.
So 2 things. One, if someone is, let's say, listening in their 20s and they're like, oh, I have time to do this, what do you tell them?
Do it now. I would say, don't.
Okay. And that's they're like, okay, fine. How do I start? I don't even know what the first action is.
Yeah. So I have to be careful not to give any advice I give is just general advice. Okay. So you want to just address, like, look at your situation and say, like we said before I start investing, do I at least have an emergency fund? 3 months at least of expenses. Once I have that, then yeah, I should invest. And the simplest way to do it, which is forced savings, is to increase your contribution to a 401k if you have one at work. That is the easiest way, especially for ADHD, because it's like out of sight, out of mind. You're just doing it. You don't have to manually put money in. You're contributing and making sure you at least get the match, because the match is literally free money. And as a philosophy, I would say never turn down free money. And then really it's like, do you want to open up an IRA or a Roth IRA? These are things that you can start doing. And
What's the difference between an IRA or a Roth IRA?
So this is the best way to think of IRA versus Roth IRA. So in both cases, you're partnering up with the government. You're partnering up with the IRS. With the IRA, he's your business partner, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to pay you later. You're going to give me a loan. I'm going to be able to put money into the business, and I'm going to pay taxes later when I take the money out. With the Roth IRA, you're buying your business partner out. So you're putting in money, you're paying tax now and putting the money in, and then you're taking the money out tax-free later. So I hope that makes sense. But essentially with the Roth IRA, you're putting in after-tax money and getting it tax-free later. When you put in a regular IRA, you're putting in money today that you haven't paid tax on yet, and then you're paying tax on it when you take it out. So usually the Roth IRA would make sense if you expect to be making a lot of money in the future, but you're making less money now, because you might as well pay the tax now at the lower tax rate, put it in the Roth IRA, let it grow for 30 years, and then take the money out of the Roth IRA completely tax-free. When your tax rate's like 35%, you're not paying that. So
that makes sense to me. What about just general, like, how do you start investing? Someone's like, I want to learn how to do this investing thing. And so they, log on to one of these websites where you can do this, trading and stuff like that. What do you tell people who are considering kind of doing that kind of stuff?
Well, I would tell them to talk to someone, but if they're hell bent on doing it on their own, I would say your best bet is to use some form of a robo advisor.
A robo advisor.
So something like a Betterment or an Acorns. These services you'll open up the account. They'll ask you a series of questions about like your risk tolerance. They'll ask you questions about how long until you're going to need the money. And they'll help provide the correct asset allocation. And what that means is the correct mix of stocks and bonds, the correct risk profile for you. So that way they're helping you do it in a way that's suitable for you. If you were to go to Schwab and open up a individual brokerage account and then just, deposit in $1,000 and say, what do I do? Then, you're on your own. And in that case, you're going to want to read and educate yourself on, how to think through that process that the robo will help do for you. You'll want to do that on your own. So you're not just buying like a bunch of crypto or a bunch of one stock that ends up going belly up and, you've lost your money. So there's lots of mistakes to be made in investing. So avoiding those mistakes early is very, very important. The name of the game is consistency, not shooting for the stars.
All right. So we're going to take one more quick break. And when we come back, I got a few more questions I want to pick your brain around. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our virtual body doubling community, Adult Study Hall, which you can learn more about at adultstudyhall.com. From our weekly guided sessions, known as ASH Plus sessions, to our 24/7 drop-in room, there are plenty of ways that you can get more done and not have to work alone. If facilitated sessions help you get things done, then check out our ASH Plus sessions for cleaning and decluttering, writing, finances, working out, creating, job search stuff, and weekly check-ins. Then this week, join me on Thursday, July 21st at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern for our monthly Pomodoro dance party. Bring your tasks and get ready to dance as we work for 2 50-minute work cycles. And after each work cycle, we will have a 10-minute dance party. If you are able to, dancing is required, but dance skills are not. Join our virtual body doubling community at adultstudyhall.com, where you can jump into our 24/7 drop-in room or any of our facilitated sessions. You can't know if it works if you don't give it a shot. So come work with us. Access to Adult Study Hall is only $19.99 a month, and it's free for the first week. You can even cancel your membership at any time without any penalties. Come work with us. That's adultstudyhall.com. Hope to see you in a Zoom room real soon. That's adultstudyhall.com. Get more from ADHD Rewired when you become a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. I'd like to welcome some of our newest patrons, Daniel W., Pastor Gene, and Lily K., who all joined us this week on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Perks start at just $5 a month, where you can get ad-free episodes of the show. At $25 a month, you can join me for our monthly coaching calls every fourth Tuesday of the month. Mark your calendars because our next monthly coaching call is on Tuesday, July 26th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And we are going to be working again on our to-do lists. If $10 a month is more in the budget for you and you still want in on the tips and strategies we share in our coaching calls, consider becoming a patron at the $10 a month level to get the audio recording of our monthly patron-only coaching calls, and you'll get access to the ad-free episodes of this show. I am so grateful for the support of our Patreon community. If it is in the budget right now for you, consider becoming a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Thank you so much to all of our patrons for supporting the show, and thank you every single one of our listeners for tuning in every week. You all help make the world just a little bit more ADHD friendly every week. So if you love the show and believe in the work that we are doing, then consider becoming a patron by going to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Remember, perks start at just $5 a month, but you can give any amount that makes sense to you. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. We are back here with David DeWitt. David, right before the break, you said one of the keys is consistency. And I'm just like imagining the listening audience in unison going, oh shit. As we know with ADHD, consistency is not necessarily one of our hallmark strengths.
Right.
Because that is definitely a key part of any behavior that we want to really do, is doing it consistently. So I'm curious on your perspective, because the way my approach to consistency is, I look at consistency as a lagging indicator, where resilience is the thing to focus on, is getting back up. And if you get back up more quickly each time you slip, like the overall sort of average of times where we're not sort of on our game, makes us more consistent. Even if there are dips, but we're trying to get back up more quickly. How does this work with financial matters?
Well, it's very interesting that you said it like that, because I have two trains of thought that are going at the same time. So let me try and take one at a time. All right.
Let's see how ADHD he is. Yep. Can he remember both of them?
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm already forgetting the first part. So the first part is with investing, it's all about setting up your mix of investments so that when the market slips, you don't have to get up as far to get back to where you were. So that's one of the big things that crushes performance over the long term, is trying to take on too much risk. Would you rather be in the thing that goes from 5 to 150 and back to 30, or the thing that goes from 5 to 10 to 15 to 10 to 25, steady as she goes? That's the way to go. So it's all about doing what's best for you by the book. I mean, it's very boring sounding, but like, do what is the suitable thing for you, and don't try and be a hero. Like, people ask me, like, I should I do NFTs? Like, what are NFTs? Should I do that?
Yeah,
and
can you explain that, by the way? Because I have asked that question to many people, and I've heard many explanations of this, and none of them make sense to me.
I'm not the guy to explain an NFT to you. I'm just not. My explanation of it is probably as good as yours.
It sounds, I don't know. It's hard for me to wrap my head around.
There was another track. I'm trying to remember. Consistency. The way to be consistent with financial when you have ADHD is take it out of your brain. Automate. Everything's automated. Set up the pipes to be really strong and reliable, and then just let it run. And don't give yourself decisions and incoming stress as much as you possibly can. And there's a lot of ways to do that. With savings buckets, there's automatic investing. There's so many different things to do.
There's a couple of sort of financial ideas that have always sort of resonated with me. One is when the market is down, that means it's on sale.
Yeah.
I've always looked at that as a time that if I have any extra money, that was a really good time to put more in. And we see so often when the market's in trouble that people are taking money out of the market, and it's just like guaranteeing your losses.
That's exactly right. If you're sell when the market's down, you are locking in your losses. And if you're selling when the market's down, it's usually a sign that it wasn't set up correctly for you in the first place. It means it was the risk profile. Well, I mean, when the market goes crazy and everything tanks, it separates the strong stomach from the weak. But if just like a day where the market's down 10% or, and you sell, it means that you didn't set it up correctly for your risk profile in the first place. And then you're inevitably going to be buying back in when it's higher. And you may have just taken off like 3 years of potential return off. You may have delayed. So it's huge. It's huge.
All right. Couple other questions here. Let's talk about taxes.
Oh boy.
So the process of paying taxes can be overwhelming. I have worked with many people who have shared things like they haven't paid their taxes in 5+ years. When that's going on, what do you suggest to people?
I suggest to do your taxes. You just gotta get them. You have to realize that the IRS is not nice and not friendly, and if you get on their bad side, they will hunt you down and they will make you miserable.
Well, and that's what they're aware of, which is why they're continuing to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't paid your taxes in 5 years, one thing you have to realize is the IRS is, if you file your taxes but you can't afford to pay them right away, doing an installment plan with the IRS is very cheap. It's 0.25% interest per month. It's a very cheap loan. You're never going to find a cheaper loan anywhere. So it's not that bad to get on an installment plan. Some people don't realize how inexpensive that is. So the general advice is at least file your taxes. You may not be able to pay, but it's 5% interest like per month if you fail to file on the money you owe. It's a huge difference. Yeah.
So if you sort of come out of hiding on your own, it is going to be profoundly better for you versus waiting for the IRS to tell you that, hey, you owe us a bunch of money.
Correct. Yes. So you should always file your taxes. You're not going to enjoy knowing how much you owe, but it's better than knowing you owe some amount of money than also get slapped with the interest that's going to be way higher. Even if you don't do the installment plan, it's only 0.5% interest per month versus 5% when you don't even file. Yeah, that's a tough topic.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's and with people that I've worked with, the thing that has always been, I guess, kind of a relief to hear is that when they've actually dealt with it, it wasn't as painful as they thought it would be.
That's correct. That's usually how it goes. It's also usually how it goes when you're avoiding your financial situation, just in general. Once you actually stare at it and look at it and analyze it, it's usually not as bad as you were thinking it was going to be.
I know when I was in the process of going through my divorce, which is the first time I really had to get a real understanding about my financial situation. I would say that I hated most of it. It was very uncomfortable and overwhelming, and I had a lot of sort of those sort of automatic negative thoughts of like, I'm not good at this. This is like confusing. But there was once I started to kind of actually grasp it, it felt very empowering, right? To really have an idea of where my money is going. There were a number of things that I was able to identify that I was spending too much money on. I was able to make some changes there. But since being divorced, I've been managing all my own finances. And so Q4 of 2021, I totally forgot to pay my quarterly business taxes. Just forgot. Got the email from my accountant and I skimmed it thinking that I had some time to take care of this thing. I misread that email. And then when I went to go pay it, when I logged into the government website, paying it wasn't even an option because I was late. And so what I'm trying to figure out, so that was one of two kind of financial mistakes I made over the last couple of months. So I know that that's the tendency. I also don't like to continue to repeat mistakes. What if I was working with you and said, I have an accountant, they do the bookkeeping, they give you my P&L statements each month. I just have to make the actual payment to the IRS. And that just part, I hate. It's I know it's not in theory, it's not complicated, but I hate having to do it. What would you recommend for someone like me or someone who's self-employed and just that the task of actually making those payments? What do you recommend?
My go-to strategy for setting aside money that needs to go somewhere is to physically set it aside. So it's It's not always possible for everyone based on their timing of cash flows and stuff. But if you have automatic payout to a separate account that you give a nickname, quarterly taxes, and the money's already sitting there, at least close to the right amount, because you can, you can project a little bit, then it's much easier to make that decision or the action to send it off.
The issue is not having the money. It's the actual logging into the government websites, which are never intuitive, right? It's like all these government websites seem like they're stuck in 1990. Because I'm always like, am I hitting the right button? Is this the right thing I'm supposed to be doing? It feels like I'm having to decode a foreign language every time I go to have to do this.
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for you. I really do. If there's no work, because I don't have much experience, to be honest, with paying quarterly business taxes. Okay. So I don't know what to tell you. Better unless the government is going to change their systems and make it much easier. I don't know.
Okay.
Do you have any ideas on that?
Hire another person to do this for me, but I'm always, there's certain aspects of my financial piece that I do kind of like to maintain a bit of a firewall.
Right.
So I don't.
Yeah. Well, a good advisor will know that you owe them and will make sure that, or will be reminding you to do so for sure.
Oh, and it wasn't from a lack of them reminding me to do so. But my
so this sounds like it was all on you.
Oh, it's 110% on me.
Yeah.
Which is why I was like, it's hard to not feel a bit of shame around it, but I also say, okay, this is the kind of stuff that I might have the tendency to do. So I got to create systems to support those tendencies so I don't kind of screw this kind of stuff up again.
Yeah. But do you do most of your taxes on time? This is a one quarter slip up?
Yeah.
Happens, right? I mean, sometimes you just got to, at least I find, just say, oh, well, I messed up.
I have my accountant has offered to put in his calendar that he needs to have a 10-minute call with me, and he'll just hang out on the phone with me while I'm actually paying the taxes online. And I'm like, yes, please. That will probably work for me.
There you go. And that is a ADHD friendly solution. So that's what it's all about.
So ask for what you need is kind of sounds like the moral of this story and really of all these kinds of things. If you don't get it, ask questions until it makes sense. If something is confusing, ask questions until you understand it. And find the right people to help you invest your money and put your money where it needs to go. Because I look at financial management as a form of self-care. Because if, I say that money doesn't create happiness, but a lack of it is certainly a source of stress.
100% correct. And it's totally self-care. I totally agree with that. I mean, how you treat your money treats you back how you treat your money.
David, if people want to learn more about you, your services, your podcast, tell people where they could find out more about you.
The central hub of everything I'm doing is my website, www.adhdmoneytalk.com. And from there, you can find the podcast. You can find the link to explore what it's like to work with me if you want to explore that. And that's basically all of it. That's it. The podcast and my planning service is name of my game. And that's what I've been really enjoying doing.
Definitely check out David's podcast, ADHD Money Talk. It's available at the same place where you're listening to this, because I think it is a topic that so many of us could benefit from spending a little bit more time to understand these concepts, because I think that if you keep staying on it, it will start to make sense. So, David, thank you so much for what you are doing and for serving the ADHD community. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you're a member of CHAD, ADDA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.